Hi everyone, my name is Laura Villalobos. I'm WiCyS Community Manager, and it's an honor to have you today with our strategic partner Google to present on the real stories of an ethical hacker series for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you a little bit more about the WiCyS organization. WiCyS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. Our community is made up of over 8.9 members of women, men, and non binary individuals in over 95 countries. We have 63 professional affiliates who are an extension of WiCyS all over the world, 225 student chapters, and that's just our community alone. What we do is create accessible opportunities to cybersecurity. We layer it with mentoring and resources, and we aligned it. Oops, there you go. We aligned it with our strategic partners and we create a place where everyone belongs in cybersecurity. And we do it through our many initiatives. We have our skill development training programs, our scholarship grants and awards, our annual conference that is in 2024 April, our Job Board Plus Plus, which members can upload their resumes and strategic partners can recruit year round, our monthly leadership series, our mentor mentee program, which currently has over 1.6 thousand members enrolled, and we have this and so much more. And we would like to thank our strategic partners for all of our initiatives. Our Tier 1, Alchemine, Amazon, AT&T Cybersecurity, Battelle, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineer Institute, Cisco, Ford, Fortinet, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Optum, Sandia National Laboratories, and Sentinel-1. And for the purpose of today's webinar, we encourage you to ask questions. We have the experts here with you today, and they will be answering your questions live. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our WiCyS newsletter. And you can do so by going to wicys.org and going to the right subscribe button. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the Google team presenting on the topic of online security. And I will hand it over to Dua. Dua, take it away.
I'm muted. Okay. Can everyone hear me? It is really awesome to be with everybody today. Thank you, WiCyS. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. And just to introduce myself, my name is Dua Elzen. I work on Google's account security and safety partnerships team, leading on our security key distribution program. So one of our major goals this year as Google in support a better cybersecurity hygiene globally is to distribute 100,000 security keys free of charge to users that are high risk of being hacked or phished. And so, we've done that by working with journalists, with nonprofits, with activist organizations, and continue to support people who are looking for more advanced security measures. So I'll also let my colleague Grace introduce herself before we get started, and we're going to kind of go between present together between the different slides on our deck.
Thanks, Dua, and thanks, WiCyS, for having us and everyone for being here. I'm Grace. I lead privacy, safety, and security partnerships here at Google. I work closely with Dua to make sure that folks are using the strongest form of authentication to protect themselves from the biggest cause of cyber attacks, phishing. So I think I'll cover a little bit of the goals today and hand it back over to Dua to get us started. So our goal is to definitely update you on our tools and features. Many of these are free in the Google account settings or happening automatically, but we think it's really important for all of you working in the field of cybersecurity, whether you're, advanced in the field or just getting into the field, that can put you at higher risk. So we want to make sure that you're empowered and know all of these and are aware of all of these tools that Google has for you. We will share a little bit about our experiences and best practices, concerns, and things to look out for. We want to talk a little bit about what we think some of the opportunities are for protecting high-risk individuals, and please feel free to share questions in the chat. and then reflect and align on, opportunities, like where do we think we can go from here with some of these tools. I see Juan has joined. Juan will be answering questions. Juan, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself as well. Awesome. I think Juan might be joining us on mute, so feel free to do your intro in the chat. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Dua.
Yeah, I'm Juan. Thank you, everyone. I'm here to answer questions, and whatever I don't know, I know Betsy and Grace can answer, so I'll be in the background. Thank you all.
Awesome. Great. So like my wonderful colleague Grace just said, we're going to be talking a little bit about our account security tools, the work that we've been doing to protect our most at-risk users from targeted cyber attacks. And so to begin with, we're just going to talk a little bit about the threat landscape. I'm sure a number of you that are in the room today are pretty, familiar with a lot of the news that's been happening. So we'll talk a little bit about what we've learned, as well as the security tools that Google has just been continuously developing and refining as a response to a lot of what's been going on, and to, again, keep our users safe, particularly with the Advanced Protection Program, as well as partnerships and collaborations. So to just give you guys a little bit of a high level look at how we protect high risk accounts. So there are three main ways. So there, as Grace kind of mentioned in her intro, one of the key things that we really like to emphasize is that these protections are automatic most of the time. Like for most users, they should be fine with the traditional and standard safety features within Gmail that automatically blocks spam and phishing attempts, within kind of your Chrome browser, that allows you to use privacy checkup and other tools to ensure that your passwords are safe. So for the average user, those are more than enough. And then we kind of shift over to the Advanced Protection Program, which is really for our users that are most highest risk. And so those types of people include journalists, activists, business leaders, campaigns, elections. And so those are users that we know for a fact are often targeted not only just by standard phishing attempts, but often state-backed phishing attempts, state-backed cyber attempts, whether it be cyber criminals in the case of businesses. So these are some really serious situations that the Advanced Protection Program is really designed as an opt-in program, and it does require 2 security keys, which is why we really have a large emphasis on getting security keys in the hands of as many people as possible that are high risk. So that's APP. And then additionally, kind of events like these where we do a lot of cybersecurity awareness and training. We work with partners such as WiCyS, and then other organizations. And in fact, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month, everybody. And so really a lot of this work hinges on a lot of our collaborations to share this knowledge and to ensure people are informed and are aware and are able to get as many people thinking about their cyber safety as possible. And so that's a little bit about how we kind of protect in 3 main ways. And then so to talk a little bit about the threat landscape, as we mentioned earlier, account security has been in the headlines over the last couple of years. Really since the last election cycle, it's become something that you're hearing about in newspapers, on TV news channels, pretty much daily at this point. And so we've seen situations, whether it be from kind of a more cyber criminal, like hacking attempt to extort money, to actually taking over elections campaigns and trying to alter elections globally. And so it's become as serious as ever, and it's really kind of essential that people understand the different risk factors. And so Google actually embarked on a little study with our partner YouGov in 2022 around the new security reality that exists, particularly in a COVID-19 world. At the time, we were seeing a lot of different and more sophisticated phishing attempts as it related to the pandemic. So, people kind of sending emails saying, donate here to support the World Health Organization, impersonating the World Health Organization. And clearly it was a phishing attempt, and unfortunately people fell for it. So we really wanted to understand what this security reality looks like, given the pandemic and given the fact that everybody suddenly had to be online and remote. and kind of more responsible for their own safety as well. So I'll leave this slide up here just for people to take a look if you're curious around some of the facts that we found out. But I think, something that I found pretty interesting was that less than a quarter of, politicos, people who work in the political sphere, and journalists were using devices issued by their workplace. So meaning actually the majority of people are using personal devices to do sensitive work-related emails and communications. And that just that puts people at an even higher risk because, usually your workplace device, we find there will be a lot of protections that are put in place by the employer. But then once your personal device kind of comes into the game, you take on an additional layer of responsibility that you just might not be aware of by virtue of the fact that maybe you're sending some sensitive emails on your personal email and not realizing that, hey, I should be enrolled in something like APP or using security keys. So the data was really useful in terms of just understanding the bad actors. So like we mentioned, cyber criminals that are usually financially motivated. So this is, taking over a company's network systems and then threatening to release their data if they're not given a ransom within a certain amount of time. And then we've also seen nation states with the intention of disrupting democracy, of altering elections, of even kind of infiltrating key infrastructure systems such as your electricity, your water systems. So some pretty serious effects once the nation state actors come in. And then hacktivists, people or groups of people, probably the most famous, we've seen online, that are using these disruption techniques to further social and political goals. And so really what we've seen is that the number one way of, taking over people's account is through phishing attempts. And so that's been the most successful way. So use a poor password, hacking into your account, and then kind of going from there. And so credential stealing, both on a workplace device as well as a personal device. We've seen DDoS attacks. And then, most of the time, a lot of the issues that we've seen in this space are actually just related to innocent mistakes. And so I think part of the education work that we try to do is to empower people like, hey, if I accidentally clicked on a link, let me, inform my IT representative or whoever may be responsible for your IT systems at work to kind of immediately go in and check it out. And rather than maybe, being afraid or not saying anything, because really time is of the essence in these situations. So we acknowledge that mistakes tend to be some of the biggest ways that people end up getting their accounts compromised. So please always make sure that you know who you should be contacting within your organizations to remedy those situations. And so we mentioned phishing and we mentioned COVID-19. And so this is like a particular example of phishing emails that we've seen in the past. And so really, again, with the rise of people being chronically online, as we've seen these last couple of years by virtue of having to work remotely, these phishing email scams have just gotten more and more sophisticated. And unfortunately, particularly when you have people who have lower digital literacy, so whether it be children or whether it be older people, they may be more vulnerable for these types of phishing attempts. And so really that's part of our job as well, is to kind of make sure that our material and our education efforts are reaching as broad of an audience as possible. And so this is also a really interesting one to look at, because I think, the first time I saw this slide, I was like, I don't know what's the difference. Like, it really, doesn't matter if you've been working in this industry a long time or not. We've seen a lot of these phishing attempts get more and more sophisticated. And so, you can try to take a look here and see where the difference is between the real and the fake. And so just being cognizant of the fact that simply entering your email and password into what looks like an official website might be, a phishing attempt. And so just being more careful around, like, paying attention to the URLs and ensuring that, you have your two-factor authentication on and you have security keys as a tool is a great way to combat this. And so, like we mentioned, phishing is the most effective way to compromise accounts. And so the most believable phishing sites trick almost half of users. And I think the interesting thing too is that you see that they move really fast. So once your account is compromised, generally your account can be accessed as quickly as within 30 minutes. And so again, kind of what I mentioned earlier of just time being of the essence in these situations. If you think, you may have clicked on something or entered your credentials into a website that might not be the actual website, really you kind of have to take quick steps to contact your IT administrator or to lock down your account if it's a personal account. And then one of our favorite tools actually is a phishing quiz. So I'm not sure if folks on this webinar are educators or they may be trainers themselves, but this is a really great tool. It's kind of a quiz that I definitely failed the first time I took and helps you identify phishing attempts and what to be looking out for. So we encourage people to take the quiz themselves, but also if you are an educator or a trainer, feel free to use this free resource in your next training as well. And now I'm going to hand it over to Grace to talk a little bit more in depth about our security tools.
Thank you, Dua. Yeah, so what I love about this presentation is we set up the landscape as Dua has and just what a big problem phishing is. But the good news is that there are solutions. So if you use multi-factor authentication, use some of the free tools available to you, you won't, even if you were to accidentally fall for a phishing attempt, the bad actor is not going to get into your account. So that's what I want to speak a little bit about. First, I'll just extrapolate on. Dua mentioned the automatic protections that we have at Google, and this is something we're really proud of. We have teams working around the clock to wipe out entire classes of cyber threats, so that is not ever felt by our users. We really believe in this idea of secure by default. So a great example of that is blocking 99.9% of all phishing and spam in Gmail automatically for folks. Safe browsing technology, as well as our Play Protect security. So the apps that are actually on the Play Store are going through really rigorous security checks and scanning at all times. These Dua mentioned privacy checkup. If you haven't gone to myaccount.google.com lately, these are some of my favorite tools. Like literally just and also you all working in cybersecurity, you're important evangelists in your community. So these are some of our most easy to use free tools that if there are folks that that you're a little bit worried, like, hey, I'm pretty sure someone in my family has used the same password for like 10 years. Take them to myaccount.google.com, show them a security checkup. Anywhere you've signed in with your Gmail account, it'll show which passwords need to be updated, or it'll also alert you if a password has been subject to a data breach. Sometimes this happens on like third-party sites or apps. We see that and it'll notify you so you can change that right away. And then the password manager, we love that this is built into Chrome, but obviously there are other password manager options that folks like to use. We like the seamlessness of the password manager experience in Chrome. But as folks probably know, password managers are key and they help you generate long, sophisticated passwords and they save them for you. That password manager itself is encrypted. So a really important tool. And then privacy checkup is also great, especially for folks who don't want, who consider themselves higher risk, or they want to toggle and change kind of like basic things like, okay, I don't want to store like the place I go in Google Maps. It just, you can turn things on and off. And then just focusing a little bit more on these specific tools for high-risk individuals. The Advanced Protection Program, as Dua mentioned, is opt-in. We really built this because of the reality for some particular individuals who are at super high risk. So again, I think those automatic protections we've mentioned, provided you're using like two-step verification and a password manager, we feel pretty comfortable with the general user using those protections. But for some, if there are resources such as the bad actors that Dua mentioned, trying to break into that account, we wanted to give them an option to say, hey, Google, give us the best you have. So that's how the Advanced Protection Program was born. And these are the three key things that APP is going to do for your account security. The first is defending against phishing with the unphishable technology of security keys. The second is blocking malware. So we know that malicious downloads are a problematic entry point for bad actors. So there is additional scanning that happens that's not really like felt at the user experience level, but there will be more scanning on downloads in Gmail and Drive. And then lastly, prevents fraudulent access to your data. So this is actually controlling kind of what Google data you send out to third-party sites and apps. The example I like to use is, say you're downloading an app to use once, and it's asking for access to all of your Google photos. If you've told Google you're a high-risk user and you've enrolled in advanced protection, Google is going to prevent that action and say, hey, like, you've proactively opted into this. We don't think you should be sharing this data out. So again, it's a slightly different user experience. It's not for everyone, but for those that are very worried about their being a target, we think that this is the right approach. And then I did want to share with you all a really exciting advancement in, we call it multi-factor, two-step verification at Google. Also, as you know, multi-factor authentication is passkeys. So if folks aren't familiar with something called the FIDO Alliance, if you are, it's a wonderful industry forum that a bunch of organizations come together, Google and others, to advance security technology, specifically authentication standards. So we're really thrilled because maybe 10 plus years ago, folks started talking about this idea of a passwordless future. Like, we all know that is very challenging to manage passwords. Obviously, we have things like password managers, but we also know that security keys can be a user experience lift for folks. It's part of why we're so committed to training and distributing those. But maybe there are folks that don't consider themselves super high risk, but they want the strongest form of authentication. Enter passkey. So this allows you to sign in with your Face ID, your fingerprint, or your phone PIN. Those things are stored device side, so those are not like going to the cloud. They're actually staying on your device and allows you to authenticate. So Google has enabled this as a way to sign in to your Google account, and we're also partnering with other organizations. We've launched it with PayPal, so you can sign in and do that with other sites and apps. So we're hoping that more and more folks will adopt this, and we think it's a really seamless multi-factor authentication solution. And here's just a quick mock-up of sort of what the process looks like of using passkey on your Google account. And then lastly, I think one of the, Dua touched on this, one of the most important things for us is collaboration. So if folks aren't familiar, we've launched a clinics fund to bring more cybersecurity training and education to universities across the US. Think like a legal or medical clinic, but for cybersecurity. We're so excited about that. We kicked that off this year. And then when it comes to high-risk users, we're really collaborating with many nonprofit organizations like WiCyS to think about, okay, how can we be most helpful? How can we make sure that folks are aware of these tools, but also what feedback do folks have for us, so that we're designing our products in the way that are the most useful and easy and seamless for those that need them the most. And the security key program certainly falls under that, distributing those keys around the world, which Dua has done a wonderful job of. So I'll leave it at that. And maybe, Juan, if you want to elevate any questions, or I think we want to pass it over to our colleagues, but yeah, I think that's the end of the show for us.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Dua and Grace. That's super awesome seeing all that Google's doing to try and keep all of our users safe. And thanks so much to Laura and WiCyS for having us here today. What I want to talk about next, shifting gears a little bit, if you heard some really cool stuff that Google's doing today and that piqued your interest, I want to talk a little bit about coming to Google. So interviewing and how we hire at Google. A lot of the stuff we'll go over can be applicable to other companies too. So it's not just Google specific, but that's kind of what we'll talk about for the next few minutes here. What I'll talk about, do a little introduction on who I am and why I'm talking to y'all. Then we'll talk about the interview process overview, preparing for interviews, and how to apply to Google or other companies and resources. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A for all of us here. So I'm Betsy Sherrod. I'm a recruiter at Google. I've been at Google since February 2015, supported software engineering, supported security engineering, supported hardware engineering. I've supported a lot of different groups here at Google, currently focusing in the security space. I'm based in Austin, Texas. And fun fact, just to show that your path might always not be a linear one. The first role that I applied to at Google was actually like a contract position for a pastry chef, because I went to Le Cordon Bleu in Paris for pastry school after going to college. So anyone can do anything. So, but that's who I am. Just want to give like an overview of the Google hiring process. So while this is specific to Google, I would say most companies follow a very similar path. So just so you kind of know what to expect when you start getting into the interview process and flexing those interviewing muscles again, because it's kind of that muscle memory thing. It's a total skill being able to interview and kind of getting back into it. So how Google does it, what the interview experience typically looks like is you have 1 to 2 phone interviews. This could be with a hiring manager. It could be with some folks on the team, could be with just someone on the general ladder that you're applying for. If those go well, then you move forward to the on-site interviews. And I do on-site because a lot of places don't do on-site in person anymore. They're virtual now. But everything covered in these interviews is exactly the same as they would be as if you were, in our Mountain View campus or in our New York campus. You just get to do it from the comfort of your own home. So what these typically look like, it's usually a panel of 4 or 5 interviews. Most of them are going to be technical interviews if you're applying for a technical role. If you're applying for a non-technical role, then they'll be focused on the role that you're applying for and the skill set that will be needed for that specific role. And then regardless of what role you're applying for, everyone has to have a googliness and leadership interview. It's a silly word that I realize outside of Google probably sounds kind of funny, but inside of Google, being googly is definitely something that we really try to do every single day. And that's just treating people the way that you want to be treated, trying to do the right thing, and just, overall being a great coworker to others. So once you do the virtual on-site interviews, the next step is going to a hiring team review, get a few more sets of eyeballs on your application and on your interview feedback, get a consensus to move forward. And if we're able to do that, we can go ahead and extend you an offer. So that's kind of the general Google hiring process. Again, this will apply to a lot of other companies too, not just Google specifically, but this is how we do it. Preparing for interviews. So this is I mentioned it earlier, interviewing really is kind of a skill that you have to hone and kind of practice in order to make sure that you bring your best self to the interview process. So I want to talk about, what we're looking for, what we're not looking for. So the things that we are assessing in the interview process are communication and collaboration, problem solving and your analytical skills, your role-related knowledge for the role that you're applying for, and then any relevant technical expertise. What we're not going to do is ask you trick questions or puzzles or brain teasers. I think the Google of yesteryear did that in the previous interview processes, but we don't do that. We want to see kind of what you're working on, how it's relevant to what we're working on at Google, and how that can be kind of a symbiotic relationship, and make sure that you're excited to come to work every day and can really bring something great to Google. Some general best practices for interviewing. So the big thing I want to highlight here is that we're not always just interested in what you're saying or what you're thinking. We want to see how you're getting to that solution. And I often tell folks, even for technical interviews, interviewers are often assessing how you arrived at the solution, not just the solution itself. So, when you're kind of getting in that interviewing mindset, you always want to explain yourself, err on the side of over communicating if you can. If you can think out loud, that's always ideal, just so they can kind of see your thought process. If you prefer to think in silence, kind of get your thoughts together before, saying what you want to say, that's totally cool too. It's always great to tell your interviewer that in the beginning, just so they know you're not just being quiet or shy, or, you're rather just processing things a little bit differently. So that's a great tip to just keep that in mind when you're talking to your interviewer. Always try and clarify. So, regardless of whether it's Google's interview process or another company's interview process, a lot of questions are going to be deliberately open-ended for that reason of being able to see how you process that information and how you think. So it's great to try and restate the question so that you can confirm your understanding of the question that's being asked of you, and asking if there's any other information that might be helpful for you to answer the question. Listen to your interviewers. The interviewer isn't the big bad person trying to poke holes in your solutions. They're really there to help you and facilitate that process and help kind of get you to articulate your thoughts so that we can then assess if you're a great fit for Google. So, think of them as an ally and not as someone on the other end of the table that's trying to go against you, and they are here to help you. So be sure to kind of listen to them, take feedback, try and improve your solutions if you can, and iterate. If you hear some feedback, it's always great to kind of bring that in and apply it to your solution. And then the last thing is just practice. So Like I was saying earlier, it's kind of that skill that you just got to hone. If you haven't done it in a while, getting the cobwebs off. It's always great to practice with folks that you know, either in the similar field or maybe at your company if you're trying to move internally, whatever it is. Practice makes perfect. So if you can practice with as many folks as you can, there's also tons of resources online that might not necessarily be like Google sanctioned, but you can do some Google searches and find some really great resources to help you prepare. And kind of mentioned this earlier, it's not just a right or a wrong answer. So the things that an interviewer is going to be asking themselves as they're writing their feedback is, how did the candidate analyze the problem? Did they approach the problem methodically and logically? And are they able to express and explain their ideas clearly? So keep that in mind. Even if you got the solution, you're like, man, that was not the most optimal solution, but you realized you explained yourself well, you had kind of a good background for why you did what you did, and you were able to articulate that, that can still be, an awesome interview. Some tips for virtual interviews, since that's kind of the lay of the land these days. Just some general things here. Always test your equipment before your interview. Make sure everything's working. Find a quiet place. Try and have a non-distracting background. A lot of these seems like, well, duh, of course you do that. You would be surprised. So these are just some general things to keep in mind so the interviewer is not distracted as they're talking to you. Make sure everything's charged. Have a pen and paper ready to scribble notes, even if you're like, no, I'm all on the computer. But no, it's really great to have an old school pen and paper in case you want to jot something down, and share your thoughts out loud, because you do kind of miss things a little bit without that in-person interaction. Sometimes it's really great to make sure that you can articulate what you're feeling so that they can actually hear you, because they might not necessarily get to see your body language and things like that. Make sure your interviewer can hear you. I always think this is a really great one, because if they can't hear you and you guys haven't, solidified how the communication is going, it can make it a little bit awkward later in the interview. So just make sure they can hear you. Make sure you turn on captions if you want. That can be really helpful. And honestly, just be yourself. Just as much as you're in the interview process, you're also interviewing the company that's interviewing you to see if it's a great fit for you. Some general tips too, continued. Every interaction is an interview. So that could be your interaction with your recruiter. It could be your interaction with your recruiting coordinator, a hiring manager, really anyone. If you are going on site, the person at the front desk that's showing you to the room, all of those are part of the interview process. So you always want to think of that as inclusive of every interaction that you have. And like I mentioned right before, every interview is two-way. So make sure that, when you're going through the process, you're also assessing if this is a company that you want to be at. And hiring really is a window into company culture. So getting a feel for the company you want to join, and if that's somewhere that you want to be and see yourself at, the hiring process is a really great way to get a feel for that. So how to apply. So this will be specific to Google, but Google has a careers page. You upload your resume and a transcript if you are a new grad, and then you click submit. Super easy. Some general application and resume tips. So this is not necessarily specific to Google, but network, attend conferences, webinars like this one. LinkedIn groups and events are really awesome too. When you are applying to roles, try and find the roles that you meet the most of the minimum qualifications, and ideally some of the preferred qualifications, to really give your best chance of getting to the next round of interviews. You can do job alerts, which are awesome, and you can save them for specific companies, including Google, and then they'll let you know when those jobs become available. And try and keep your resume objective and think in terms of numbers and impact. So less about summarizing responsibilities and more about articulating action. So we really want to see what you actually have done and how you're able to share that with us and how it could apply to whatever company you're applying for. Also get feedback from folks like myself who see resumes every day, from your peers, mentors. Reach out to anyone that you think could be a good set of eyes on your resume, and that's always really helpful. And then be consistent. So you control the narrative across different channels. So it's 2023. So we have, a paper resume, which couldn't tell you the last time I printed my resume, but you have a resume, you have your LinkedIn profile, you have your social media presence, and probably a lot of other things that I just don't know what all the cool kids are doing these days. But, make sure all of that's consistent across all those platforms, and be mindful that a lot of that is accessible to anyone, if it's public and things like that. So just be consistent in your messaging. Some general Google resources. There's a Google Students YouTube channel that's really awesome if you are, a student or a recent student. There's also Careers on Air is great. And then there's another resource here, the Google Build for Your Future site, which is awesome too. And that's it from the recruiting side of things. I'll hand it back to, I think Laura will take it from here.
I think you're on mute, Laura.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So thank you, everyone. And we can just hand it over to the questions now. The first question that we have is, just notice a note in the details section of this meeting. Google will provide a free Titan security key to attend. Is this correct?
Yes, this is correct. We're very excited to provide keys to those that are interested. And so after this webinar, there's going to be just follow-up communications that are sent out by Laura. So we'll make sure to include a form that requests all the info from you so that we can get keys out to you within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. We have Michael. With those so many threats delivered via phishing, what percentage of threats are sorted by Google tools? Are there ways to protect folks from themselves?
Thank you. Yes. So I think this was in one of the slides, but we're really proud of this fact that we're blocking 99.9% of all phishing and spam automatically in Gmail. But you're right that there are still steps that folks should be taking to protect themselves. And we really encourage using a strong form of two-step verification, also called multi-factor authentication. So for many folks, passkey for the Google account is going to be a great option. But if you go to myaccount.google.com and check out two-step verification, that will have the options available to you. And then for those who are higher risk, especially those working in cybersecurity, we do recommend those security keys. Probably in your enterprise environment, you're already required to be on two-step verification, but we also really recommend that for the personal accounts because, as Dua mentioned, that is an attack vector that maybe folks don't always pay as close attention to.
Thank you, Grace. Tracy said, are small businesses or large businesses more at risk of cyber attack?
So we are, I wouldn't say you could say one's more at risk than the other. I think there are different types of attacks on, for example, a larger business, it might make them more of a target if like a cyber criminal thinks they have more to get. But we are really committed to protecting small businesses. So we're really excited about the tools, for example, within the Workspace admin console that make it easy to crank up the protections for small businesses. So we do think that this work is critical to focus on smaller organizations who may not have the IT staff and security as a larger organization. And also something for all of you on this call to think about is your role wherever you work and how you can help evangelize some of these best practices. We do find that, especially in smaller, very small organizations, having that talent, having that person who's the go-to, who's really informed on this, really helps create a culture of cybersecurity. Dua mentioned, being willing to speak up if you click on something suspicious. We do think that's important for businesses of all sizes to instill that culture.
Thank you. We have Prachi. I am MS in Information Security student at CMU. I'm looking forward to apply to the internship role with security engineer team. I wanted to know how to research for the security domain-based interview if I make it. As I checked on the open roles link, there are no roles for cybersecurity team. So how to research them on Google?
Yeah, so thanks, Prashi, for the question. So internships is always a big question, and we are doing our internship program. I think actually some roles were recently posted for next summer. So I would just keep looking at the careers page, setting up those career alerts if you can. That's a really great way to start. In terms of researching for those specific domain expertise interviews, if you get to have that call with the recruiter and get to that next step, they will provide you with resources to go ahead and prepare for those interviews and kind of direct you on where you should spend most of your time on preparation. So they'll be able to give you some preparation once you get to that point in the process.
Thank you. We have Prachi again, he said, I was part of a mini cyber simulation game as part of our class where we had to put our hats of different roles in the simulation and try to investigate what went wrong and listen to the phishing being the major attack vector surface. I remember the simulation and realized it's always some or other kind of phishing during the recon phase that gives out the most crucial information needed by the attacker to attack. Extrapolating the conversation on security, I was recently reading through CVE 2023-5217, and I wanted to ask that I will be picking up a course on machine learning, security, and web security about how Google has its own database of vulnerabilities and how its own features can mitigate those as we are talking about online safety tools. I think that he was just sharing that. Thank you, Prachi. And it looks like that is all the questions we have for today. Dua, Betsy, Grace, do you have anything you want to say?
Just thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the Google team for kicking us on our Ethical Hacker series. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Juan, too. And enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate everyone.